Laura here. I'm here today to do the top 5 Wednesday this week, and it's top 5 things in the bookish world that I am a Grinch about. If you guys have been watching my videos for a while, these things are not going to come as a complete shock to anyone, but I felt like it would be a fun video to do. So the first one might be a little bit controversial, I'll be a little bit honest, but it is the lack of solely male leads in YA literature. By saying, I do love that we have so many female characters, and I love that they really are dominating the YA genre, which is really interesting because in any other genre it is not the case, but I miss male protagonists, and I grew up as a part of the Harry Potter generation, and I'm just was so used to male leads, and then there was this dramatic shift where there was only female leads, and then there was this thing where we were getting female and male leads, but now it's just that's the only thing we're getting, and there's very few stories that I've been reading that give you a solely male lead, and the stories that are solely male leads just don't seem to interest me. So maybe I need to like diversify my interest a little bit more. But there are some books that I'm really intrigued by that do have male leads, like the Great Library series I know has a male lead. Denton Little is Dead is also another one. But a lot of the stories that I've been reading recently have like a dual protagonist, so it's like a female and male, and that seems to get really, really popular. But finding a story just told from a male point of view is very, very hard. So if you have any in the comments, please let me know. I Percy Jackson, obviously, but it's very hard to find male lead stories. So if you have any in the comments, but that's one thing I wish that like writers would realize that not that it would be nice to have a balance between male protagonists and female protagonists and have them lead their own stories, because I think it would just create even more diversity. So that's what I want. I want diversity in our lead characters, to have maybe not even split, but maybe a little bit more representation for males. That's a very, very controversial opinion, but alas, that is one of my things. It's going to come as not a shock to anyone. So I'm going to say it, and then if you don't want to hear me talk about this topic, just fast forward like 2 minutes. Or 3 minutes. So this theme is abusive relationships are the ideal and what we should strive for. I have had this issue since I read Twilight, when Bella and Edward were revered and loved, and I honestly, still to this day, that relationship really makes me sick to my stomach, and I can't read it. I have a lot of issues. I think what I have an issue with is when writers clearly make very, very weak female characters, and then the relationship is also unhealthy, because that just shows. Or when you make these really, really strong female characters in a fantasy world and their relationship status is just dangerous and scary, and I just cannot support that. So I implore writers to write characters that not only are strong but also have a okay relationship. And I think sometimes when you do fantasy worlds and you create these medieval societies, it's really, really easy to make a girl subservient to a man, or have the man almost be very, very abusive towards his female counterpart. And I think that is something so dangerous, because then you create this really interesting love story that goes love-hate, and then it turns to love, but at the end of the day, how healthy is that relationship? And I when I find a really good relationship that I like, most of the time I find them in contemporary novels. I love all the relationships in the Katie McGarry series. I love all the relationships in most of the relationships in the Thunder Road series by Katie McGarry. But all these characters really found a balance, and I think that sometimes when you're in fantasy worlds, the balance doesn't really exist, and then you have characters that aren't as strong. So that's my gripe. This is no shock. I've talked about this before, and I will probably talk about it again. But yeah, I want young girls or people who read these books to see that what an ideal relationship should be, and the relationship ideal should not be an abusive relationship. Sorry. That will be no shock to anyone, but it is lack of sexual and ethnic diversity in novels, and also the fact that the books that we do have are not written by own voice authors, and if they aren't written by them, the lack of research sometimes makes the book a little bit unbearable to read. The reason I'm saying this is because for a while, the only way that you could get any type of diversity in your novels was in contemporary stories. And I love a contemporary story as much as the next person. But what I saw a lot before this year was they were just issue books. Like, there was an issue book about this, an issue book about that. And we do still have issue books, and those are great, but I really want to expand and have these characters and these stories not just in issue books, but also in other genres like mystery, like sci-fi, like fantasy. It's gotten a lot better, especially this year. I have read so many books that have had, you know, sexual diversity and ethnic diversity in so many different settings. Like, I think the two strongest series I read were both historical fiction, and it was Passenger and The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, where they dealt with heterosexual, homosexual relationships, and also race relations. And I thought that those were so well done. And it was like, it could be considered an issue book, but it did it in such a creative way in their like genre that I really enjoyed. Now, of course, I understand that sometimes a non-voice author, one voice author just is impossible, or maybe someone has this great idea for a story and really, really wants to write it, and that's great. A couple examples of this that have produced successful books is Susan Dennard with the Truthwitch series, where she has a transgendered character, which I thought was amazing. Rick Riordan is another man who writes really, really strong characters, and you can really tell that these authors do their research. The problem that I do have, though, is when you are writing about, a sexuality or a race or an ethnic background that's not yours, and you don't do your research. And there has been so many issues over this past year where people are writing stories that they don't necessarily have the background to write, and they're not getting sensitivity readers to do it, and that's a big problem. And that's something that I'm strongly advocating, that even if you do want to write these stories, make sure you have someone look at it, or multiple sensitivity readers, just because you never know what in a culture you are offending. I will get off my high horse on this topic, but what I hope for 2018 is not only more diverse author pools, but also more diverse characters in literature, and just to have them be reflective of that culture, no matter how that happens. But that's my hope for 2018. And it's getting better, but I, of course, always want it to be better. 4 is insta-love and rushed endings. And I kind of group these two together because it's kind of the same thing. Problem I have is like pacing of a novel. And I want to talk about the insta-love thing because it's a problem for me. And I think it's more of like an engagement factor. Like, if a book opens on page 1 and your two leads are in love by page 5 or chapter 2, I literally have no investment, because I feel like it's contrived, and I almost am like, well, why do I care about these characters? Because they met 2 chapters ago. I much often love when they meet on page 1 and the book ends on like page 300, and at like 250 there's an inkling that there might be something more. That's why I really like series, especially in like the sci-fi and fantasy world. So I really love slow burns in that way. And I know sometimes contemporaries, that's like a little bit harder because that's kind of the pace. But I just want like not insta-love. I want like a development. And I love books that take place over like months in contemporaries and not like a week. And then by the end we go like, oh, we're going to be together for the rest of our lives. That just seems so unrealistic. One book I really read that I really liked recently was Better Off Friends by Elizabeth Eulberg. That went over the entire book was over the course of a whole high school experience. And I really liked that concept. And also like other books as well. It was like the Katie McGarry series, because it's like over like years, which again is like you meet these characters and then like 2 years later they get together, which again is something I really like. But also the rushed ending, and I think this happens a lot with debut authors, is that they rush their endings and they want to get it out so fast, and you're like, oh my god, this is so amazing, and then it's so rushed that you're like, oh, I wish they would have expanded on that a little bit more. So those are my rushed things, or my insta-love tropes that I just wanted to talk about. I don't talk about them as much, but I wanted to give my opinions to you all, and there you go. That I don't think I've talked about on my channel much, but it's author hate. And I think that I started my channel, I think the year after Legion came out, so I didn't have to deal with that whole, like, drama. But author hate and authors, like, getting death threats and Instagram hate comments, literally, like, it makes my blood boil. Like, I understand that we are readers and we are giving them their, like, livelihood, but we literally have no right to do that. Like, we can decide to not read someone's book. We can decide that we may not want to read something by them in the future. But this is their world, their creation. They decide what happens. And I am all for expressing opinions. I have given, I would say, critical reviews. I always try to focus on the positives, but always, like, say, like, this is maybe, like, the world building wasn't strong or the characters were, like, weak. But I always try to, like, keep it respectful, and if I ever tag an author in a comment, I always try to keep it nice and respectful. And I only ever tag authors if my reviews are like 3 or 4 stars, or three and up, no below that, because I think that that's just mean. And I always think that someone put their heart and worked so hard on this novel, and we really should not be giving them hate. And it makes me so sad to hear that authors are afraid to tour or are getting death threats. Like, I don't understand that. And when I encounter authors in real life, which I have the blessing of doing because of where I live and I get to go to conventions all the time, I'm always so thankful that they come out and tour, because it is such a blessing, and so it makes me so happy to meet these people that I venture into their worlds. And it makes me so sad that some people really, really want to try to ruin that. And I don't understand the other side. And honestly, these stories sometimes make me sick to my stomach, and I, like, cannot fathom that. I have some authors that I would love to meet, and I know that it's going to be really, really hard because of all the death threats in the future, and I'm just like, oh, why can't people be nice? Be nice. But those are my thoughts overall. Those are some of my book-related gripes. Comment below if you guys have any book-related gripes. Sorry if this video offended anyone, but I wanted to put it all out there. I'll talk to you guys later next week.